Hey guys, my name is Mark, co-founder at Scenery, and today I want to show you how to use the tool, how to create new content, and a little bit of an overview of a platform. So when you start up Scenery for the first time, you'll be greeted with a Discover section. Like this is where a few highlighted experiences sit and where there's potential for also your experience to be showcased. If you scroll a bit down, you have different resources linked, like joining our Discord or best practices in spatial storytelling, as well as a bit of our documentation. Now, on the left side, you also have an asset library, and under experiences, an overview of all your experiences. What's going to be really interesting today, though, is, and that's what we're going to be focusing on, is creating a new experience and explaining how that creation looks like. So you click Create Experience or Command N to create a new experience, and you'll see an overview of different templates, right? So there's all kinds of templates like face tracking, image tracking, physics playgrounds, different use cases. But for today, let's start with a custom one that basically starts from scratch. So click this, and you'll see a context view. It's important to understand that within Scenery, you have multiple context types that you can give an experience. Wall tracking on the very top is the most versatile. It basically lets the user place a scene wherever they're at, and it runs on most devices. If you go for geo-tracking, this means that you're anchoring an AR experience to a very specific location. Now, if people and users are on that specific location, it automatically localizes with one of two visual positioning systems, short VPS. That means that we have both the geospatial API from Google as well as location anchors from Apple implemented into all the experiences that you create, meaning that content will localize automatically in urban areas. A play space is a predefined play area that users can place wherever they're at. Image tracking means that your whole experience is tracked to an image or multiple images, and that there is no other elements in the three-dimensional scene and world around the user. Face tracking basically is a face-tracked experience, and body tracking as well as room-bound are things that are up on a roadmap, but not launched yet, but will be coming soon. Another important element that you'll see throughout Scenery is the compatible with section down here. So depending on which context, for the sake of simplicity, let's take wall tracking, you'll see that these elements change. And when you click them, you'll see that this experience is fully compatible on iOS. It runs on macOS, but some features are not supported in the simulation mode. It runs on visionOS, and Android is in the works through WebXR. Now, let's set, again, the most versatile tracking and experience context to wall tracking. One last thing to have in mind here is that after you define the context once, you can't change it. So think about where your experience is going to take place and what the best context is. As said before, wall tracking is the most versatile. So we're going to create a wall tracked experience and start. Now, what you basically have on the left is the hierarchy as well as the selection for multiple scenes. On top, there is the ability to add scenes, to redo and undo. You can take snapshots for preview images from within the editor over here. You can access your asset library. You can send content to a device in real time. It's basically like a hot reloading feature. That means while you're editing a scene and you have the same experience open on another device, may that be a Vision Pro or mobile device, you can preview the scene in real time and all the changes that you make to it. Speaking of preview, you can preview the scene simulated on your Mac or on your iPad, both for the full scene as well as for a certain interaction that you set. And settings view, and you can hide basically the bar on the right. Speaking of the bar on the right, like this is where all your settings live, and it's a contextualized bar. So depending on what elements in the scene you click on, this bar and this view on the right-hand side will change. And lastly, below at the very bottom, you'll see, or you have a section that hosts both the events, that is our system to create interactivity within the different elements in your scene, And there is a dedicated section, if you tap it, for materials, post-processing effects, data sources, and all of that kind of more in-depth stuff. So let's start. Let's start creating a scene. And let's maybe start on the very right-hand side of things. So what you'll see, well, is when you click an object that there is always a container first, and within that container sits the 3D model. Have in mind that it's two distinct things with two distinct coordinates. So you can change with the gizmo the position both of the anchor as well as of the model or multiple models that sit within that container. Now, in terms of best practices, it's always best to rather reposition the container and the anchor where you want to have it in the scene, and rather do slight tweaks if you go from there within the model. Now, speaking about anchors, this is one of the key features of scenery. Because when you click it, you'll see the contextual window over here on the right changes, and you'll see by default its position, but you can also choose a whole different set of options when it comes to anchoring. And the unique element here is that it's not like within a context that you can only define this one anchor type and that's then true and valid for all the elements in the scene, but it basically gives you the ability to mix and match multiple anchor types. So you could totally create a well-tracked context, an experience that you can open anywhere, but within that you have multiple image targets, hand anchors if it's supported on Vision Pro, for example. You can play with horizontal and vertical planes, even define it further if you want to classify a plane to only recognize a wall or spawn content on a wall. So there's a lot. Let's go quickly over them. So position anchor is just like the most versatile. Again, it's a position of the object. If you choose another object, that means that you can anchor your object on another virtual object in your scene. If you choose a horizontal plane, well, anything that you choose here will automatically spawn wherever the system recognizes a horizontal plane, but you can give a classification to that plane, meaning only spawn this element on the ceiling, on the floor, on a seat or a table. And that is a very interesting ability to tell more immersive stories, because you can make your content only appear in places where it makes sense for your content and your content to appear. Now, beside horizontal plane, there's also vertical plane. You can anchor content to the camera, so when the camera moves around, the content will basically stick to it. Your current point of view, meaning the object will be anchored to the point of view, but then if you change the camera position and your point of view changes, the object still stays in the place. You can anchor content to your hands and choose if it's the right hand, the left hand, if it's a wrist or individual joints. And you can also anchor content to a specific image. If you go for that, you need to upload a reference image and make sure that the width of the physical image that you're tracking the experience on is put in correctly, so that the system knows how big your marker or your reference image basically is. Again, for the most versatile option, let's go with position. And let's have a look at how you can add more elements to the scene, right? So if you want to add more elements, you just go to the top bar and click the plus. You can add an empty container. You can add another 3D model. You can add a media type, primitives, may that be cubes or spheres or planes. And you can also add like a mixed reality portal component that's basically pre-built with you and that you only need to fill with content. Now let's add a media type, and maybe because it always spawns in the center of the scene at 0, 0, 0, let's put it somewhere over here. And if we want to make it bigger, which you can't do with the anchor, but which you can with the media type itself, so I'm selecting it here and scaling it up a bit to 200% roughly. Right. So let's have a look at when we click something like this, how the context menu over here changes. So you've seen before, if we go to anchor, it's basically the position of an anchor. But when we click the model itself, then this view changes, and it offers us a variety of different options that we can try to cover, because there's many that we're going to try to cover quickly. So first of all, and that's an important one for all the different elements in your scene, you can give a name to the object that you're using here, right? And although you don't have to do that by default, you see like the position anchor is a position anchor and the object is an object one and the 3D model is a 3D model. It really helps to keep your scene tidy, specifically when you add 20 plus different media and 3D objects and media items. And when you now create interactivity, depending on what you're looking at, what you're tapping at, it really helps to have a better and clearer understanding over here. What is what? So let's give this not a name yet because we don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to come back to this very shortly. So you can always put in a name, press enter, and you'll see right next to the 3D model, it showcases the name that you just typed in. So below you have the different transform options that you can also lock. You can lock the scale, you can play with the rotation, either by just like dragging around the gizmo and playing with it, or by typing in certain values. And the vertical alignment is an interesting one. So basically what this means is by default, it always is, the object is positioned where, well, you position it as the creator. But if you go for floor, it will always stick to the floor. And if you go to eye level, it will always be positioned at the height of the camera. This is in particular interesting if you, for example, create a scavenger hunt, right? Like if you want objects to be in reach because people need to collect them and you don't know if your users are going to be very tall or if they're going to be kids. So you can make use of the eye level vertical alignment to really, sorry about that. So in these cases, you can make use of the vertical alignment to be sure that your objects are always in reach. Now, if you press none, it will just not have any vertical alignment constraints. And if we scroll further a bit down, we see the alignment constraints where we have billboard and look at. Now, this is particularly interesting for media files, which I'm going to show you in a second. But billboard basically means that wherever you, as the user, are, the model or the media type is going to look at. So it's always, by default, going to look at you, the user, which can be crucial if, for example, you're inserting characters or if you're inserting elements where it's important that users can always, no matter where they're at in the scene, always look and read what's on there. Now, the look at functionality and alignment constraint does a similar thing, with the difference that you cannot just look at the camera, what basically billboard is, but you can also look at other elements in your scene. Meaning you see like this is the 3D model that we uploaded here, but it can also face the media type or another object. So again, if you have a character that's animated and is moving around in your scene, and you basically have another object that has the look at alignment constraint, it will always look at the other object, which can be quite useful when building immersive stories. Then the transition smoothing basically allows or gives you a bit more control over how much it's like really sticking to the object, or if it's like slowly also turning in the direction that the object is for a more natural look. If you scroll a bit further down, you can see that this 3D model, right now it's just like our default model, has different options, right? So you can exchange that for a primitive, and that primitive you can change to horizontal, vertical plane, box, and spheres. You can also use integrated assets that are in there. In that case, where they go, there's coins, crystals, emeralds, dices, and rubies, and stars. And particularly interesting if you want to build scavenger hunts. You can also choose a custom model, which again by default is this one. But if you choose a custom model, it will also, a button will appear that when you click it, will open your asset library. And your asset library is the place where, as the name suggests, all your assets, may that be media types, may that be 3D models, all of that kind of stuff, sits, and where all that stuff is living. It also indicates with the little symbols unique elements about these assets. So for example, when you see this little symbol appearing here, this icon, it basically means that this model has an animation, has an integrated animation. So for the sake of simplicity, let's add this plane to the scene, and boom, it's in there. And it even automatically copies the name, as you can see. Like that would have been my next step, to rename it to toy plane, but it automatically does this for you. Now, this is our animated plane. Right now we don't see the animation, but when we preview the scene, which we're going to do shortly, then you'll see that there is an animation included. If we look, go back basically to the settings view that adapts. In that case, we clicked the 3D model, so it adapts to the 3D model. And we scroll further down, you can set the opacity. Maybe that be to 1, meaning like it's fully opaque and like it's fully rendered. But you can also put 0.5, and you'll see when we make it bigger, like it gets kind of translucent. So put this back to 1. We want our plane to be actually in there, not see-through. That could feel dangerous if you're sitting in the plane. And below that, you see a limited compatibility. It's not a warning, it's like an info, a little info box, right? And when you click it, it shows you, again, what we know from like the context selection from the very beginning. So you see that this opacity feature in particular only works on iOS versions of 18 and higher, also only works on macOS 15 and higher, but is fully compatible on visionOS and is not yet there on Android. So keep an eye out for these little views, because specifically if you're designing an experience for a specific platform or max reach is really important for you, make sure to only use what your user base can also basically open and run. If you scroll further down, you see a fitting box. By default, there's none. You can also set a fitting box around objects that will reduce the size of it to whatever values you put in here. And this can come in really handy when you export a 3D model from whatever 3D tool that might be, and something got wrong with the scale, and it's humongous. It's like 1,000 by 1,000 meters. So that would be a teeny tiny bit too big for the scene and for the view here in scenery. So for these projects, for these 3D models in particular, you can choose a fitting box to alt squeeze it in a certain size. By default, let's choose none. And with a pivot adjustment below that, you basically define where the origin point of that 3D model is, right? So is that basically at the bottom? Is that at the top? You'll see like it updates, gizmo goes to the very top, or is it in the center of the object? Let's put it back to bottom, scroll up a bit, zoom out a bit, and there we go. So, next section is lighting and shadows. So below that, you can define if you want shadows to render for your 3D model. As you can see, casting dynamic light shadows, grounding shadows, and receiving grounding shadows is all optional. It, again, depends a bit on which platform you're on. To increase realism, we definitely suggest to enable shadows. That being said, though, sometimes that can be a very compute-intense task. And depending on the complexity of your overall scene, this is an ability for you to optimize and to maybe squeeze out a bit more performance, specifically in experiences where you maybe not necessarily need, in that case, the shadows. So have a look here. You can always like unfold and fold these menus up to keep everything nice and tidy. Below that, we'll see like animations. So every object, once it's added to the scene, has a reveal animation. And if an object disappears from the scene, then you also have a removal animation. And the default is that the model scales up and at the same time fades in. Like that's a very subtle and nice introduction of a model to the scene. In some cases, though, you maybe don't want any of a reveal animation at all, right? Maybe you just want to place the content in there, or you just want to make it appear but without the scaling and just the fade in. So all of these things you can define here on the right-hand side. between fade and scale, disable completely, or basically choose a default. You can also decide if model animations are being autoplayed and if they loop under the animations tab over here. And if you go further down, like you'll see material overrides, where you can choose different face culling options and where you can add custom materials. Now, materials is something that we're going to dive a bit deeper in shortly. So let's get back to this in a bit. If you scroll up again, you'll see there's an appearance tab that we just went over, but also a properties tab. Now, have in mind, we still have the 3D model selected. Hence, this is everything on the right-hand side here is about the 3D model. There's events that we can add here, but again, something that we'll dive in deeper shortly. Under general, you'll see that you can hide by default the object, meaning the object, and a very important one, a discovery guidance, which by default is set to none. A discovery guidance basically is an arrow in the scene that points to the object that you have selected. So it gives the user hints, or one particular hint. It gives him an understanding like where to look at and where to go. Again, if you're building location-based outdoor experiences, this can be really helpful as a navigational element to always basically not just make the user aware of where to look, but also where to go. And the closer you get to it, the moment you see it for at least 5 seconds, it will disappear, that discovery guidance, if you put it to initial. If you put it to permanent, this arrow will continuously point to the object, no matter for how long you're looking at it or how close you're getting to it. So in short, discovery guidance can be really helpful to direct attention to certain elements in the scene, specifically relevant if you're building location-based outdoor experiences. Now, under audio and haptics, you can attach both an audio as well as an haptics file to it. And this is really powerful because that basically gives you the ability to create multi-sensory experiences that you don't just perceive visually, but that are, again, of multi-sensory nature. So when you set the audio to spatial or ambient, it really helps to create the illusion that this object is actually there. Now, for example, though, if you have a voiceover that's not coming from a certain source, but that you want people to hear, or background music continuously on the same volume, level of volume, then ambient for sure is definitely your better choice. So you can, let's maybe upload a plain sound. That's handy. And you'll see, like, once we preview the scene, that, well, the plane is animated and it also does a sound like a plane. And that this is spatialized because it just makes sense that the source of the sound is heavily linked and behaves in space correctly to where the plane is. So if the plane would travel and animate somewhere else, that also the sound would go there. You can adjust the volume, which comes in quite handy if you play with multiple audio options and basically bring in sync ambient audio, background music with narrators and different sound effects. And below here, you can create haptic files to, again, create multisensory experiences, meaning you basically create a haptic pattern that the phone and the tactile and haptics engine in the phone recognizes. And it basically takes the highs and the lows of an audio file, most of the time of like a sound effect, that then give the illusion, give you some haptical sensation, and give you the illusion that what you're hearing and seeing, you're also, in a certain sense, you're feeling. Now, if you want to dive deeper into the spatial audio part of things, there's a lot of emission behavior options that you can dive deeper into. What you see down here. Let's fold this again for a better overview and look into gestures. So you can enable a gesture that users can basically drag around, rotate, or resize the objects that you put in the scene. Now, this is in particularly powerful in Vision Pro because it feels very magical if users can just like take something and play with that, and it feels quite natural. But this is really up to you. So by default, you curate your experience and you design it, right, with a certain idea. So it's not really interactive. That being said, if you want certain elements to be interactive, you can always do that by enabling gestures. And when you do so, you can also constrain it to certain axes. For example, if you want to build a slider, or if you want to just like make something that people can pull out and push back in, but like not completely move around. So gestures can be really powerful, specifically when combined with events that we'll look into shortly, where a certain event is triggered when one object comes together with another object, right? And that can trigger whatever you want it to happen next, because that can create like gamified mechanics in your immersive experience. And below that, there's also physics options. So you can give any element in the scene really, physics. And there's differences between static physics options, which basically means the object reacts to other virtual objects that have physics, but itself does not give any impulse or anything. Dynamic, meaning it reacts to other physics elements in the scene, but it's not based on a user input. And kinematic, where the user basically gives a physics impulse. So for now, though, we don't want our plane to fall off the sky, so we don't want to give it physics, because otherwise gravity will pull it down. So let's just put this off. And besides 3D models, you can also add media files to your scene. Remember we already added this element to the scene before? So let's take a closer look. Once we tap it, we see the view on the right-hand side automatically adapts to this media element over here. And whereas most of the options you already know, with the transform and the vertical alignments, a few things are different. So first of all, within this media element, there is both videos as well as images that you can integrate into your scene. And with videos in particular, the interesting bit is that we support not only a floating rectangle, but also transparent videos that you can export with an alpha channel. For example, to create little characters or videos of characters that almost have the sensation of depth, although it's just like a plane. You can upload your spatial videos that will render in 3D stereoscopically, specifically on devices interesting like Vision Pro. And you can obviously also just use an image. But for now, let's do the video, click the placeholder to upload something, and let's maybe use this blue nebular. So by default, you can see it's just like this floating rectangle. And you have a few media-specific options here, like showing the loading placeholder while the video is still loading and buffering. You can decide if the video file basically loops through, if it's rendering on both sides, double-sided, and one particular option that is quite unique, which is render immersively. So once we tap that, you'll see like that a custom shader gets applied to the media element automatically, and it gives it a vision-like feel that embeds itself and blends way better into the scene around you. So playing with that, which works both for videos as well as images, in combination with spatial videos is a really strong case and a very easy one to do because it's just like one click of a button, specifically on hardware like Apple Vision Pro. Now, we never really previewed a scene, so let's have a quick look at both the little plane as well as the media file that we have sitting over here. And we can always preview anything in our scene, like to see if we're happy with it and to tweak certain things. So by pressing Command and P or just hitting the play button up here, you can preview the scene. And you'll see the media file plays nicely with the immersive blur around it. And the plane that sits over here hovers with the integrated animation. And if we're getting closer to it, you can even hear the plane. Maybe also if you move around, you'll hear a difference. That is due to the spatial audio element that we set before, right? So it will mimic this sound source and tries to tries for it to be as realistic as possible, so when you walk around, that the sound also basically moves around you. Now, if we're done, we can always press stop, get back to our scene, the overview basically, and continue with like the overall experience settings as well as the scene settings. So what you can see already, if we don't have any object or an anchor selected in the scene, once again, our menu over here changed a bit. So under experience settings, you find specifically under information and discovery, you can give your whole experience a name. Let's do this, my first tutorial. You can give it a description and certain tags, as well as categories, many to choose from. Both first, primary, and secondary. You can give it an experience thumbnail, which is really crucial because with that thumbnail, your experience is going to show up within scenery. So ideally, use something that is compelling and visually striking. And below that, there's a really important section, which is the availability of your experiences, as well as the ability to share it to other platforms. So if you click availability, there's three options. Public means your experience is publicly available and accessible by anybody and can be also discovered by other users. If you leave it to private, it basically does not really leave your device, meaning only you have access. Think about this. If you want to share an experience, though, whilst working on it, maybe across different Apple IDs or users, and your experience is set to private, it won't open because this really is just on your machine then. Now, if you set it to link, is like something in between, like it won't show up anywhere publicly, but anybody with this link can basically access your experience. So that's what we set as a default. Once you click generate link, a very quick link has been generated for you. And if you share this link, other people can view your immersive experience very easily. Now, if you have not subscribed yet to either Pro or Agency plans, this link will only open the Scenery app on a device that you open it on. If you are one of the Pro or Agency subscribers, though, then this link automatically gets turned into an app clip, which is going to be shown to you also by this little app clip symbol right next to it. And an app clip basically means that any person that opens this link, even if they don't have Scenery installed, can access your experience right away, specifically across mobile devices. On Vision Pro, that's coming hopefully soon. Now that means if you put that link behind a QR code or an NFC tag or just a button on a website or an email newsletter, you can access the experience right away without downloading the Scenery application, which is a pretty big one when it comes to the accessibility of your experience. Below that, you'll find supported platforms. By default, that's set to all, but you can also choose if your experience is only supposed to run on a Vision Pro, then to really limit it to Vision Pro specifically. If you do not limit this, it works across platforms. So the same experience that you maybe have designed for mobile, people can also view on a Vision Pro if they have the right hardware to do so. And the section below is called branding. This only shows up if you're in an agency plan. And that basically gives you the ability to add intro texts that show up on a UI before the experience starts. You can give the whole experience a custom tint color, add header and logo images, and specifically the logo will automatically appear on all shared content. So whenever you create an experience in Scenery, people or users in particular can take snapshots and videos from within that experience. And if you upload a logo here, and if you're under the agency plan, then these shared content bits and pieces, so the images and the videos, will automatically get a watermark with any logo that you upload here. So if you want to use this commercially, this section might be in particular interesting. Now, if we scroll back up, there, right next to the experience settings, there's also scene settings. So once again, we can give a name to the scene. Let's call it the main scene, because this is where we start. That's the main scene. Below there's scene events that we're gonna cover very shortly, as well as meshing options. So meshing options basically allow you to either enable or disable a mesh for the floor. Any mesh that the system needs or creates, if you enable it, takes a bit of performance. So we want to give you the ability to decide if your experience is rather on the heavy side of things, and therefore you rather disable stuff like floor mesh or also the whole world meshing, or if you enable it. Now, we highly recommend to only enable features that that your experience needs. So if you're playing with physics and stuff is supposed to roll around your floor, you definitely need to enable the floor mesh. If you want your experience to be deeply rooted in the physical environment, and you again have physics and want objects to fall down from a table, or to hide behind physical structures, so to be occluded by it, you definitely want to enable world meshing, as well as other options that we're going to cover shortly. So next up are physics options. So once again, if you want the real world to interact with the virtual content in terms of physics, you need to enable the scene mesh collisions, and you can give the whole scene a certain amount of gravity. Occlusion is there's two options for occlusion. There's object occlusion, that what I just referenced basically means that there is a mesh that's being generated of the physical environment of yours and an understanding of the depth, meaning if there is a virtual content that's sitting behind a desk, that it won't render it, like it won't show up to the user because, well, if it would be a real thing that's behind the desk, I also would not see it. Once again, takes up some performance. Specifically, object occlusion also only works on LiDAR-enabled devices, but it can really help to create and increase specifically the realism of your experience. So if you want to make use of that, just enable it over here. Same goes for the people occlusion. So people occlusion basically means that the camera understands, based on a machine learning model, what a person is. I think some pets are also supported. And it will also understand depth if you want it to. And basically what the machine learning model does now, it understands the depth of the scene and where that person is in relation to the virtual content, either occluding the virtual content or you being occluded by that virtual content. Once again, if you're creating like photo opportunities in AR, and just in general, if you want to increase the realism of your immersive experience, this definitely helps. Below, you'll find post-processing effects, which once again, we'll cover shortly once we dive into the materials as well as the events section, which you find down there. Up next, let's look at events, because this is the place where you breathe life into your experience and where you can create interactivity within all these different elements that you now added to the scene. So below you'll see there's two types of events: scene events that contain the whole scene, as well as object events that you define for each individual object that's in the scene. Now, with scene events, as you can see, there is automatically two events in there because we added two elements to the scene, and if there would be no event down here, they would not be rendered, right? So basically the system does that for you. It automatically generates an add object to scene event. Now, if we take a closer look at object events, let me pull that up here so we have a bit more space. You can see when we click event and add event that there is a new event name that we can give it. There is an model or an object that this refers to, in that case the toy plane, and there is a trigger that we can define. Now, there is a whole set of different triggers. On will appear just before an object appears, on did appear right after the object appears, on removal if it disappears, on tap gesture when you tap the object, on camera collision when the camera, so the POV basically of the user, collides with this object, when another object collides with this object, when there's a certain distance to this object, and when you look at this object in particular. So have in mind that when you tap this, there's even more options popping up. So for example, look at could be the user looks at an object, or also the object looks at a different target for at least the duration that you put in here, and that will then trigger an action. So most simple and versatile one is on a tap gesture. So let's take this one. and add an action. You can see a view that pops up that gives you a whole set of actions that you can mix and match and combine. So you can add content to the scene or remove it. You can play an animation. You can update blend shape weights when your 3D model supports blend shapes. You can modify the transform, set the opacity dynamically. You can play audios, like set an ambient audio, toggle an ambient audio, play a normal audio, stop, emit haptics. You can also apply an impulse if your experience has physics, and apply angular impulses, reset element physics, and also scene physics. You can transition to completely new scenes, as we've seen before. You can create multiple scenes and then dynamically transition to new ones. You can set post-processing effects, surrounding effects, open a link, and also end the whole experience. As all good things, even your experience has to come to an end. There's also further dynamic behavior, specifically interesting if you want to, for example, toggle an event or an object. If you want to build like an on-off cycle or a button that you tap on and off that has multiple states. You can cancel scheduled actions, and if you want to dive deeper into custom scripting, a feature that we will be launching really soon for our agency clients, you can also trigger custom events, run scripts, and show debug messages. So for now, let's maybe play an animation. But for now, let's start with play an animation, as we want to have a very quick and brief look into the animation system that also ships with scenery. So as we can see, this first event on a tap gesture on that toy plane, it plays an animation. And when we tap it, you see again the view contextualized, the contextualized view changes. So the animation target is the toy plane. That's what we chose. We can choose a whole set of different animations, may that be from to, from by, also the ones that are included in a model, spin or orbit, and there's a whole set of presets like poppin', blinking, flipping, floating, jiggling, spinning. So get creative with all of these different presets that are in there. But for now, let's take the from to. And once we choose that, you can already see if we zoom in a bit, and we now change the position, that this little bit holographic look showcases you where the initial object was, and we can then decide where it's supposed to go. And let's bring it over here maybe, a bit further up. Whoops. Right. So, you can also change the animation property, so opacity, and like mess around with the blend shape weights. You can change the duration, so let's maybe put that to 1 instead of a quarter second. The transition duration, the speed, a delay, if that is supposed to repeat, if it's additive, and you can also just play around with these ease in and ease out curves and change different presets over here as well. The reference base is something that you can also change. Can be local, can be walled, and it can be also point of view. Now, if you want to see how that action looks, just the animation, you can always try or preview that by just press run action, and you'll see, right, it goes up here very quickly. So let's do that to 2 seconds and run the action again. Yeah, that looks a bit better. So once we're happy with that, you can click out of it and go back to all events. So there's little breadcrumbs that will basically always take you back or take you into the view. Boom, your plane is animated. So when we preview the whole scene now, as you can see, it's on tab, floating up here. Yeah, that's good. Now, the event system lies in the combination of multiple events and multiple actions. To showcase this, let's add more, right? So you can either click the plus button or you right click and add an action. For now, let's maybe add a weight and bump that up instead of like half a second to 1 second. And also add a removing from scene event. So that basically means that we do want to get rid of the video once we interact with the plane. So we tap it, select object 2, which is the video, and when we preview the experience, you'll see once we start tapping, let's go back a bit, it goes up, there's a wait, and the second object disappears. Now, if you want all of these things though to happen at the same time, then you need to create a group, because by default, every action that you add happens sequentially, as you've just seen. So you can either right click and add an action and create a new group. You can though also just drag these over each other and it will create a group automatically for you. Now, in comparison to what we just saw, if you're gonna preview the scene, and by the way, you can also press Command and P, you'll see everything happens just as before, but if I tap, everything happens at the same time. The wait, as well as the remove the experience and the animation all trigger simultaneously. And that's about it. This topic of events and actions is a big one. So we will share a video with nothing but that, where we dive a lot deeper into more complex interactions and also giving a bit more room and more space into each of these individual ones. But that would make this video of today very, very long. So keep your eyes open for that one launching very soon. Up next, let's take a closer look at materials and post-processing effects. As with these, you can really push the visual fidelity of the experience and push it to new heights. Now, when you tap materials and create a new one, there is different options. There is unlit materials, there is video materials like video textures that you can apply to certain parts of a 3D model or a full 3D model. There is occlusion textures, custom shaders, as well as Material X shader graph. The latter one being one that you can create in Reality Composer Pro very easily and then bring it into scenery very quickly. Now, let's take a closer look at custom shaders. Now, these custom shaders are metal-based. So as you can see with this little pop-up, it has a limited compatibility and won't run on Vision OS. There is a name that you can give it, the type of the shader. You can choose if you're uploading it from your asset library or if you want to reference a shader file that's sitting on your computer and that you can edit in real time. So when you would tweak the text file of the shader, that you'll see the changes appearing in real time in scenery. For the sake of simplicity, once again, let's look into our asset library. Click here and you'll see the asset library automatically only gives us the different shader files. So let's take the rainbow one and say use it, which brings up a lot of the different shader functions, which again, today we won't cover in detail as that's a topic for a video in itself. You can though see like the different options that you can set for this one in particular. And still, if you take a closer look, there's no shader that has been applied to anything on our scene. This is because whereas we create a new custom shader material here, let's call it rainbow, this is not applied to any object in our scene. And if we want to do so, we need to click an object, like our little plane here. Let's do it. Scroll down and say add custom materials over here. Whereas we can create a new one right within that view. You can also add a reference, which in our case would be the rainbow. And once you tap it, you'll see that we turned our little metallic plane into a rainbow kind of plane. So you can dive quite deep with these, but I think that gives you like a super rough overview. So definitely just play around with the different custom material options that you can set and what kind of impact that has on your scene. Now, next up, we also want to take a look at post-processing effects, right? So once again, if you're in that tab and you create a new effect, you can choose if you want to apply a filter that is basically a whole set of different filters that we ship with the system, or if once again you want to use a custom shader that alters the whole view of your phone screen in that case. But let's go with a filter and add one. So as you can see under add filter, there's many options. And I don't know, what do we want to do here? So maybe let's go with something classic, like a sepia tone maybe. And once we do that, you'll see like the whole view, the whole scene, everything is like put in a filter, and it has this like sepia look to it. Now, you can add the intensity, and play with the intensity, maybe tweak that a little bit, put that down. And as that's basically being shown in the scene the whole time, you can also enable or disable the post-processing effects view very easily while still being in the editor. Now, and once again, if you preview the experience, it should be applied to the whole scene. Have in mind that you can also trigger these dynamically in the event system. So there is a lot of powerful combinations with events, actions, and also post-processing effects and shaders. And that wraps it up pretty much. We covered quite a bit of ground today, so thanks for sticking with us. Now, we hope that it was a good overview and you better understood the different UIs, the features, and the functionalities of the platform. We know that there's many topics that require a bit more in-depth insights, and we'll release videos over the coming weeks and months, so keep your eyes open for these. But until then, we can't wait to see what you'll be crafting. So happy creating, and thank you.